Drinks podcast. Thank you everyone for coming out. Today is a very, it might be a very contentious issue today. It may be a little spicy in the comment section, and I can already see that some of you lovely people are commenting your thoughts and perspectives on Dr. Kipp and his work. So this will be good. Let's get into this. We need a petition to change the official Deep Drink song to that. I've really grown to love that song.
And have you? I guess I just have to come back more often. Because I'm you may have noticed I used it for all the videos that I released.
Yeah,
and I think I'm sticking with it. So
yeah, it's so good. It doesn't get flagged either.
Oh, am I allowed to drink that? Sorry.
Oh, well, no, you well, that's a great question. What are we drinking today, Kipp? And you always choose amazing.
Do I? Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, you do. So actually, wait, before we do this, if anyone doesn't know who you are, Hebrew Bible scholar, expert on ancient scribal witnesses, ancient scribal practices, PhD in religion and theology from Manchester University. You're part of the team that discovered forgeries in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and you're an expert on Second Temple Judaism. Is there anything else that I've missed that's relevant to today's discussion?
Father of 3.
Father. Impeccable taste in music. Dog owner. Impeccable taste in music.
I have a cat. We don't see him a lot anymore though, because one of the dogs likes to chase him. So, that's so that's that's mostly me. I like to snowboard in the wintertime, and I mountain bike in the summertime. Although I went on my holiday at the beginning of July, and on my very first run with my buddies, I had a spill and I broke my finger. So
I saw that, and I said to you, I always discourage anyone from exercising because you can injure yourself. So it's never healthy to exercise. Just stay home and eat cheese. That's
it. And day drink.
That's the healthy life. Yes.
But I took some Advil and I finished the day, which I felt really good about. But the next day, I went and we were planning to do some riding the next day, and then I was just gonna come home, right?
Oh no. This is the internet. Oh no. Oh no, the internet problems. This is what we were talking about before, and we haven't even gotten to the drink. Hang on. Are you back?
Hello?
Can you hear me? Yes, I can hear you.
Hello? Okay. Let me
a mythicist DDoSing your I will let us know if oh no, I hope this doesn't.
No, I'm just dude.
Oh good. No.
Hold on. Am I back?
Yep.
Hello? Okay.
Yep.
So I actually just turned my Wi-Fi off because I think it's I think it's possibly it's jumping back and forth. So as I was saying, I went to bed, I woke up in the morning, and I don't know, you could see the bump there, right? Can you see the funny bump on my hand? Try and get it. Yeah. So I think that's permanent now. But I woke up in the morning and my hand looked like Mickey Mouse's hand. And I was like, I could maybe move it like that, but there's no way I could even grip my bar. So I was like, I don't know if I should ride today. And I have not been back on my bike at all for the whole month of July. I was off my bike, which is weird for me. So I think I'm hoping I can get back on it here in the next week or two. But
yeah, well, hopefully you can, and hopefully what we're drinking today will ease some of the pain if you still have any. What are we drinking today?
We are drinking Kentucky Mules, and I have made my Kentucky Mules with fine, well, there we go, Wild Turkey Kentucky bourbon, and this nice premium ginger ale that my brother bought for me. This beer, and it's interesting. This is new for me because my brother got me this case of premium ginger ale, and I was like, what the fuck am I supposed to do with this? So well, I did what I've become accustomed to doing, and I asked Twitter, and I was told I should make Kentucky Mules out of it. So I started doing that. Yeah, they're great. So
that's awesome. Well, I've got cheers. I've got Bundaberg ginger beer, which is the come on, focus, which is the
oh, there you go.
Which is a town in Australia, and I got my special Iowa
oh my god,
Slipknot number 9. Come on, focus. We just got a little bit left in there. Breaking my rules, I'm technically supposed to only listen to Slipknot while I'm drinking this, but this is a special occasion, so I'm happy to and yeah, I'm really excited to drink this.
Maybe the sound of my voice is a little bit like Slipknot.
Yeah.
Does that work?
Well, maybe everyone in the maggots in the crowd, that's what Slipknot fans are called.
Turn it on,
get angry
guys.
Enough and
turn on Slipknot while you watch.
I have to ask, and we had initially had a first question that we will get to, but I have to ask first, why do you think that this is such a contentious issue? Why do people fight about this subject like it's literally their entire identity? I am flabbergasted by it. What are your thoughts?
So, I mean, I think that people on both sides of this issue are clearly entrenched. And I say that in a sense that, so, like, how do I put this? I think people who, and we're talking about Jesus mythicism directly, indirectly. I mean, my whole thing, I don't know if anybody knows, but I've made a couple of videos now, and there's a third one coming about the Jewish source material behind Richard Carrier's theory of minimal Jesus mythicism. So I basically went into his book to look at the Jewish source material, and we'll talk about what I have discovered and what I think is going on. But with regards to this question of Jesus's existence as an actual person, I think those who are strongly committed to denying the existence of an historical Jesus, by and large, have arrived at that position from a polemical starting point, I think is the way I'll put it. I think what happens, and I've talked to people who jumped right into this idea. Oftentimes what happens is people will deconvert. They will deconstruct. Deconstruction is stressful. It induces all sorts of anxiety. I think that a lot of people will latch onto this idea. And it sounds, let's be honest about it. It sounds, it's plausible, right? Given the source material that we have for the existence of Jesus, it's certainly plausible that he didn't exist. So right from the start, and for people who don't know, I mean, the Gospels are hopelessly buried under layers of theology. We have a smattering of references outside of the New Testament, in Josephus and in Tacitus and Suetonius. It's not the evidence itself on like a how do I put this, on, I guess, a all things being equal, the evidence itself doesn't seem compelling because of this smattering of third party witnesses. Although scholars will tend to argue that what we do have is actually fairly remarkable, given what scholars think about who Jesus was and what he did, because he's certainly not the Jesus from the gospel. He was an itinerant Jewish apocalyptic charismatic who got in trouble with the Romans and was executed. And that would have been the end, if not for a small following that started the church in Jerusalem, and then ultimately Paul, who dramatically, dynamically adapted the religion, the early Christian religion, into something that spread across the Roman Empire. Basically developed it from a Jewish sectarian cult into a more Greco-Roman friendly international type of worldview. So now where was I going with that? So that's like the scholarly idea, and that's what and scholars tend to think for whom we expect Jesus to have been in real history. It's not surprising that the sources are as bad as they are. But then on the other side of this coin, when it comes to explaining the origins of Christianity, it still seems much more plausible that the model that's been constructed of this Galilean apocalypticist who was executed and whose followers eventually deified, that makes quite a bit of credible sense. Given
something that, like, I just to butt in there, something that I first got into a tiff. My first interactions with Godless engineer John were a tiff on Twitter, where I said, it's clear to me that mythicists are only mythicists for the fields, and he didn't like that statement, and we got into a bit of a back and forth, and then I said, let's jump on a live stream, and I jumped on his live stream, and he quickly pulled apart the fact that my understanding of mythicism was, this is my understanding of mythicism at the time, Jesus didn't exist, lol. Like, I didn't know any of this. Like, I didn't think there was anything more to that than mythicism than that. But I quickly retracted my position correctly, because I was showing stuff. However, it seems to me, now I'm not saying this is the case for Richard Carrier or for John or for a lot of people who actually research this stuff, it's an easy excuse for people. Now, I'm kind of poisoning the well here, I know, but this is just kind of my, we're not doing like a deconstruction of the middle myth theory here, but I'm just kind of pointing my 2 cents. It seems to kind of to see Jesus as the minimal myth concept, where he's this this deified cosmic thing. It totally discredits Christianity. Like, if there was no, I think the things that for me that make Christianity viable are things like if the resurrection actually happened. Now, if that didn't even happen on Earth, it happened in the cosmic realm, and it's like, not, it's a very, for someone who may still be concerned about hell, or maybe still be concerned about what if they're wrong about their Christian faith, or their lack of Christian faith, or they've still got the hang-ups about the church and the Christianity. It's very nice. It's very convenient to be like, it was all bullshit. So I still think that my statement stands true for a vast majority of people. And the reason I say that is because they act, the mythicists that I've encountered, not all of them, but a lot of them, act as if they act like religious zealots, in that, like, I've suggested books to my audience, and I've said, this is a really good book. It was a book on by a Marxist talking about the political and sociological environment of first century Palestine, where Jesus, and they literally, and I quote, I won't read this because I'm a mythicist, as if they've driven a nail in the ground, a stake in the ground, and saying, this is like, that's like, I'm a Christian, so I wouldn't read such a thing. And that has always like irked me the wrong way. And then you've had a few lovely messages from people. Do you have any that you could share?
So my the comments section on my most recent videos has turned into a train wreck. But so yeah, I mean, I can share a couple of these that I've I think these are the ones that I here I have to select that. I think these are the ones that I sent you.
Yeah.
So I'll pull these up. Here's one from this. Can you see that?
Can you zoom in?
It's
like, open
very.
it.
How do I
open it right up?
Oh, yeah, there we go. Oh yeah, let's do this, guys. There we go. So here's the first one from this lovely guy by the name of John McIntyre 8468, and I think the icon is telling. You know, he's got a picture of that guy Kenneth Copeland there.
Yeah.
With the tears coming out, and in all caps, because every great point has always been made in all caps. He says, "You have been compromised by the cult of historicist academic elites who need to resort to attacks and gaslighting to discredit Carrier, who is the only scholar telling the truth. You can't prove that Jesus existed. Nope, you can't. And you are proving Christianity right. Lol. Carrier is peer-reviewed from Columbia, and you are just a YouTuber." And then he complains that I can't even debate Carrier because I would get demolished. It's probably true. But, you know. Oh, sorry, David, that's you. So, but he had a bunch more. Here, he said, he posted this on one of my videos then a little later. He said, "You can't change what is already peer-reviewed."
Which is the smartest statement I've ever heard.
That was kind of confusing to me, because I'm like, I mean, you can see from our response here, I'm like, what exactly does this guy think peer review is in the first place? And then there's one more here, I think, too. Oh yeah, here he says, "You're the possessive genetic the genetic form. You're just mad because Carrier's book changed the world and made everyone nervous that Christianity is wrong." So
now I'm not. We all get crack heads in our. Sorry, I shouldn't say crack heads, but we all get crack pots in our comments from time to time. Sure, but John, like, honestly, like, Godless Engineer, if you're watching, Richard, if you're watching, Dr. Carrier, if you're watching, the amount of people. I'm sorry, but the amount of people like that come to us, come to me at least, whenever I talk about mythicism, on the mythicist side, very angry and spewing these kind of like points. You might even see some in the comments later on in this video. It's alarming, and I'm wondering. This makes me think personally that it comes from a more emotionally emotional spot than an academic spot. Not saying there's no way to academically rectify this. I'm not making that claim. You might, Kipp, but not me at the moment.
Listen, no,
we even have this psycho in the chat. Myth Vision podcast. Who's paying for the historical kit? Do you to be a historicist, Kipp?
We know that Jesus didn't exist. You know.
We know. That we know Jesus didn't exist.
The truth of the matter is, when you get your PhD card,
Yeah.
They also you have to sign off in blood that nary shall you ever dare suggest that Jesus might have been, not an historical person, because we just can't have that. So I don't know. And you know what? I prefer not to, I just want to say, I would prefer not to speculate about why people think the way they do. But what I do want to do, and what I had hoped to do with my video series, was that what I had hoped to do was to focus on what these texts actually say. And to be clear, I think maybe going back a little bit, my series of 3 videos was never intended to tackle the mythical Jesus. That's not the point, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably not qualified to do that. I'm not a New Testament scholar. I haven't spent my life working through this literature at a level adequate enough to tackle that question. And I should point out, I see Richard's in the chat, but I should point out that I don't think he is either.
Well, let me just quickly pump the brakes too. I got a message from, as I said, I got a message from God Listen to You, John, on Facebook Messenger, who said that historicists also do the same thing, and that might be the case. I'm not on the other side. I'm not on the side creating mythicist content, so I don't get insane crackpot historicists. But I'm just saying, this may be the contention. John and Richard might get a lot of angry historicists yelling at us, and this might be the reason why, and then everyone's yelling at pseudo versions of each other. Anyway, and Richard, seems like Richard Carrier is in the chat. Hello, Richard. But yes, keep going. Sorry, Kipp.
No, that's fine. I was going to say, I don't. So that was never the point. To take on this question. But I've been intrigued by the question because it seems to come, and let's be honest about this as well. This is a social media phenomenon. So this is, as I've spent most of my time in social media, I've become keenly aware of this question, which almost it's not something that's readily discussed within academic circles, which is where I'm coming from. So that was curious to me, this idea, where does this come from? Why is this so popular in this space? So after hearing a lot about it, I decided to go and look, because one of the things that, and I'll go way back here, long before I ever had my YouTube channel. I actually think I was still maybe even a PhD student, or had recently just graduated. The other thing, maybe I should have mentioned that people, I'm a Canadian, and as a Canadian, you are, bound from birth to be a hockey fan. So I am a big fan of the Calgary Flames. Go Flames. And for many years, I participated on a message board, and in the off-topic forum, I remember seeing there was a post once in the off-topic forum about the kind of the zeitgeist version Jesus mythicism, which is that was made popular from this crazy crackpot conspiracy movie.
Yeah, I know.
Like 20 years back or whatever.
That was the idea of mythicism that I had before I spoke to John. Yeah.
So and there were like a bunch of memes being posted in this on this message board, and I'm like, well, this is silly. And so I just responded. I said, this is silly. and somebody challenged me and said, well, you know, you have no evidence. What do you think you know about this? So I said, look, and I laid out the case as I saw it for an historical Jesus, which is quite heavily grounded within what I know about early Judaism. So I put that out there. And one of the guys on this message board was also an administrator at Free Thought Blogs at the time, where I know Richard was used to host this blog, and so he actually took it upon himself to send this stuff to Richard, and Richard responded, and then he said, "Hey, here is, you know, Richard Carrier's response to all of this." And I looked it over, and you know, it was very thorough and wordy. And so I actually responded back to it, but my impression was at the outset, and I think I mentioned this in my response too, that the kind of argument that Richard was attempting to make was akin to, you know, the argument for a teapot in space, where so long as there's a plausibility and so long as you can't disprove this idea, there's a chance, right? And
yeah,
I don't think it's very strong. I just don't see it. And so that's kind of where that's my background to this. I only actually got around to reading Richard's book in the last few months, and I haven't read the whole thing. And again, my interest is squarely on what how he's handling the Jewish literature, because this is something I saw early on too that I found fairly alarming, was how he was reading these texts, how he was in many instances over reading these texts or just flat out misreading early Jewish texts. So I approached, you know, this is how I approached the book, was to look and see how is he handling the Jewish literature. Is he representing it accurately? And, you know, ultimately, is this a good source for learning or knowing about early Judaism? And I was honestly actually quite surprised at a number of the ways that these texts are presented in the book, which, and it was honestly, it was, I had kind of a break in, I'm in the middle of my Dead Sea Scrolls series, and it feels like it's taking forever to get the fourth video scripted. So I'm, I felt like I'm kind of in a block, and I need to get myself out of this writer's block. I'm like, well, why don't I just do something quick on,
I said, don't. I said, don't do it, Kipp. Don't. You don't want to get it. I've seen the arguments.
Honestly, I probably should have.
And you're like, no, I'm just going to do it. I'm like,
I really need to get that cap back in the bank now.
It's going to be shit.
So that's kind of where it started. And I thought I would knock this out in 30 minutes, right? So I started, and I'm like, oh my God, like, I'm going to need a lot more videos to finish this. Oh, by the way, I want to mention those 3 videos that I did, those most recent ones, are the first 3 videos that I have made with DaVinci Resolve. And I'm so happy that my good friend Lachlan Davis over at Bible Unboxed introduced me to DaVinci Resolve, because, oh my God, does it ever make
Windows Movie
no, I have used iMovie for every video that I've ever made up until 2 months ago.
I was surprised because I asked you about. I was like, how do you get those animations? And you're like, oh, you screen record from like a PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah. I screen record. I screen record keynote presentations because I like a lot of their animations.
So all of this here is like a screen record from the.
Yeah. That's keynote, right?
Yeah.
So
which is actually a brilliant idea. I like it'd be hard to actually pull that off in a proper editor.
Hengfa, she says, I love iMovie. And I'll be honest, for a long time, I really loved iMovie too. But I have to say that in the last year or so, I feel like I've been kind of pushing the boundaries
the limit.
of iMovie. And I needed something like the last, I think the last video I made on iMovie was my Dead Sea Scrolls number 3 video. And my God, the render on that took hours to complete. It was crazy. So
it's not much better. When I do a bit of editing for MythVision sometimes. When he's super busy, and I edited your video, and I had to render your testament. I had to render it out using like software only version of like Mercury, which is the renderer for Premiere. 16 hours. And then there was a mistake, so I had to do it again. It's another 16 hours. Yeah, it took ages, and I've got like a beast.
Is that because it's all like 4K or?
That's part of it, but it's because I had to use because it kept failing on like a hardware enabled renderer, so it had to like essentially paint each frame one at a time. It's a little technical, but it's it's really just took a long time. But so when it comes to on the historicity, one of the things that I kind of came away from it when I read or listened to it. I had the Audible version. I need to get a physical version, but in Australia land, it's so expensive, and I'm a poor person right now. But we wanted to it's one of those. To me, as a layperson, it felt very much like reading. A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking, where I go, okay, if you say so. Like it's like I go, like this is really interesting. I have no way to evaluate if any of these formulas or whatever you're saying is accurate or works or anything. So for me, as a layperson, I tended to find it interesting. And to be clear, I didn't do a thorough study of it. I listened through for the conversation with GE, but and I might go back to it. But for me, like it feels safer to stick with consensus scholarship personally, because that's just. But what I find interesting is you are equipped, and unless you listen to some of the commenters in this in the comments,
I apparently don't know what I'm doing.
You're equipped at least to. In fact, you're probably an expert. Well, you are an expert, but you're probably the guy to talk to about certain aspects of this book. So, first of all, what are those? What are those parts?
So, I think chapter 4 within the book is committed to chapter 4 and chapter 5 actually are committed to background knowledge, information, and factors. Which underlie the larger theory of minimal mythicism, things that are in place which make the theory possible. And of course, it's in order to get this to work, as I understand it, you need to make certain assumptions, or you need to establish certain things about early Judaism, out of which Christianity emerged. So, and that's where my expertise is useful, is in evaluating what this literature says and how to read it, and I think most importantly, how the early Jews read these texts and understood these scriptures. Now, one of the things, and I have to say, like, and in the first video, I mentioned that by and large, a lot of these things that are put out there, these elements of background knowledge are, they're true. They're accurate. At one point, Richard makes a point of saying that, there's no established set of scriptures at this time. And that's true. And we actually have, I would say, we probably know less about the shape of scripture in the 1st century BCE than we think we do. And I think a lot of presuppositions have affected the ways in which we, even scholars for many years, have evaluated the shape of scripture within the 1st century BCE. And this is the kind of stuff that I get into quite a bit in my series, The Dead Sea Scrolls Unapologetically. I think everyone should watch it. Because, so actually in the last video in that series, it's about 40 or 50 minutes. And the title of the video is "What is a Biblical Text Anyways?" Because it is still a very current, ongoing question within scholarship of early Judaism, of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And, I think that's quite interesting. So yes, good. Richard noticed this, keyed in on this, but I think, so yes, like, and this is something that ultimately he's right about. One of the other things that he points out is that there's this vast array of expressions of early Judaism, which is true. And we know of a few of them. I don't think we know nearly as much about more than a few of them than we think we do. But I would say in my reading of the background knowledge that he puts an awful lot of emphasis, faith, in the fact that there are so many Jewish sects about which we know nothing, as a way to promote the possibility of the existence of a sect that possibly might have believed this thing, right? So, and that's kind of where things start to fall apart. And this is where I think the biggest problem I had with the book was with element 5 and with element 6. Element 5 states, and I've got it right here, or do I? Maybe I don't. Oh, there it is. Okay. Even before Christianity rose, some Jews expected one of their messiahs, heralding the end of time, the end times, would actually be killed rather than be immediately victorious, and this would mark the key point of a timetable guaranteeing the end of the world soon thereafter. Such a concept was therefore not a Christian novelty wholly against the grain of Jewish thinking, but already exactly what some Jews were thinking or could easily have thought. This is the most controversial element. I credit to Richard for recognizing this is the most controversial element in our background knowledge, many scholars being so intent on denying it. So this idea that there was already this idea that a Messiah, there was a Jewish expectation for a Messiah who would be killed and then be immediately victorious. This is not clear, and it's not clear, and I think Richard takes advantage of the fact that there's a great deal of ambiguity behind this idea to promote something that is probably not there. In his discussion of element 5, he spends a lot of time talking about the Talmud, which is very late. If you don't know, I've actually got a 1-minute video where I just briefly give a crash course on what the Talmud is. I see Godless Engineer mentioning over 24 scholars agree it was part of early Judaism. I'm skeptical about that number. I think the way they've arrived at that number is by counting stuff that's been published, but then also peer reviewers who have signed off on publication. But that's not entirely how this works. This is very much a debated issue. It is certainly not settled. Well, and importantly, I'll just say this quickly. The idea that this is current within pre-Christian Judaism depends substantially on reading key texts from the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay, and virtually all of these texts from the Dead Sea Scrolls are up for dispute. There is nothing clear about what many of these texts have to say. Well, and I'll say one more. Sorry, I keep interrupting you, and I'll stop. And I'll say this.
Listen, I interrupt you too, so.
No, it's your show, man. So
you're the guest.
We can't all be experts in everything, right? Which is why I think it's pretty important when we're forming our ideas about a given topic to pay close attention to what the actual experts are saying. So when it comes to, the Gospel of Matthew, don't listen to me. Go and look up somebody who's, or a bunch of people who spent their life working in the Gospel of Matthew. By the same token, when it comes to ideas being forwarded about the Dead Sea Scrolls, don't consult people who've spent their entire lives looking through the Talmud. Consult the experts in the Dead Sea Scrolls and see what they're saying and why they say it. And I think if you do that, then your perspective probably shifts quite a bit on this question. And we can get into some of that because I'd like to. One of the things that I've done, you do whatever you need. Oh dear, Atlas sounds upset.
he's okay.
Okay, all right. Say what. Sorry, I'll stop now.
Well,
and you go.
So what I was going to say was, this is. I think this is probably the most. This is the thing that's going to piss off, I think, GE the most. What I say here.
Well, then you say it.
But I will say it. But so over 24 scholars agree it was part of early Judaism, which is what we just talked about, and talk about peer review. You can't have this statement as a slam dunk, and then in the next breath argue that there's conspiracy amongst all Bible scholars to hide the fact that mythicism, that they have biases, Christian biases, and the most Bart Ehrman, not a Christian, is written extensively on the fact that Jesus was a historical person. I just feel like you're engaging in conspiracy at the level where, would someone mention vaccines before? I've done a lot of research into vaccines, and the MMR vaccine in 1998, there was a paper published looking at 12 children whose parents thought that they'd started developing autism spectrum disorder shortly after getting the MMR vaccine. 12 testimonies from parents. This paper was, I think, peer-reviewed, or 11 other people signed their names to it. 11 people signed their names to this paper, and that was what caused the huge wave of fear amongst parents and people and all across the world about the MMR vaccine and autism. And since then, countless studies have been done from competing organizations from all around the world with millions and millions of kids, with different types of studies to try and find the supposed link between the MMR vaccine and autism. There's having a small group of people, this is my thoughts, having a small group of scholars say one thing, if it goes against consensus, as lay people, all you can kind of do is go, okay, well, this is a fringe theory at this stage. It's just a fringe theory. You can't in one breath say 24 scholars agree, and then in the next breath say but there's a conspiracy that everyone who looks at this stuff is Christian, and that's why they don't take Carrie's work seriously, and et cetera, et cetera. Like, to me, it's like, and I know that's not going to be taken lightly by mythicists, but I honestly think it is crying conspiracy, and that doesn't mean it's not true. I want to get that across. It doesn't mean it's not true. It just it just seems this.
Can I don't know what the word is. Maybe I need to say something here about peer review, and I'm speaking as somebody who has had dozens of articles and books pass through peer review. It's nothing special. And I'm also speaking as someone who has served as a peer reviewer for articles and for books and for series. So when something passes peer review, that doesn't mean that the review. So if I'm given an article. No, let's see. I was given an article 2 months ago, 3 months ago. I don't. I had to hand it in. Yeah, I had to hand it in at the end of April. So it was a while ago. I was given this article to review for a journal publication. And when I read it, in the first place, people need to understand that publishers are going to do their best to try and find reviewers who are competent enough in, the areas of specialization necessary for reading this stuff. And they can be more successful than not sometimes. So I was asked to review an article recently on the basis of my work as a paleographer. And this was an article dealing with medieval manuscripts, which is not something I know extremely well. But I'm kind of like, it was kind of like, trying to find, it's not easy to find people who are experts in everything, or even sometimes experts in the specific minutia that you need them to be. So that's at the outset. As a peer reviewer, when I'm reading an article, if I disagree with what the article says, that doesn't mean I reject it. Okay? So if something is passed through peer review, that doesn't mean that the peer reviewers agree that this that the ideas forwarded are now gospel. So counting peer reviewers as proponents of an idea is wrong. You can't do that. I know for a fact that I have had stuff reviewed, and I've discovered after the fact who my peer reviewers were who disagree with my arguments. But, it passed through peer review anyways. So this is all peer review does, is says, this is cogent. It's not ridiculous. It's well sourced. It's well argued, and it has at least taken into consideration the important detractors to the idea. And I will say also that I don't think it always works. So there's plenty of ridiculous stuff that gets past peer review. Plenty of it. I mean, let's talk about all the evangelical Christian nonsense that gets through peer review.
I mean, isn't
you mentioned the shroud vaccine thing, right?
The Shroud of Turin. I mean, there's lots of I talked to Inspiring Philosophy about that, and he's like, I have no idea, because there's so much on both sides. There's so much,
Peer review is a good step, right? And I think I will say too, I guess I believe in peer review in large part because I have to, and also because I like to think that it's better than nothing. Okay. But by the same token, there's plenty of stuff that gets through peer review that I honestly think should not. And I just you can't continue to say peer review as if that ends the argument. You just can't continue to do that.
You can still.
It's step one. Okay. Step one is getting through peer review. Step two is convincing your peers who've now read your stuff that it's useful and meaningful enough to start citing and to affect the way that they think and they now write about new ideas. And that's super hard. Like I mean, my own bibliography on my CV is like 15 pages, right?
Yeah, I don't even understand the titles of the stuff that you like. I'm like, I don't even know what this is about.
Okay.
I've seen bits and pieces. I think when I was doing research on you for the slavery panel. But yeah, like I didn't even understand what you were writing about. Like I saw the word Dead Sea in there somewhere, but like most of the time I don't know what. Your stuff is so academic. This is what I mean. I'm a layperson. I don't have the ability to even critique a lot of the work, and so don't take my word for it.
And honestly, a lot of my stuff just never gets cited because it's super arcane. Like I wrote an article about I wrote an article about one fragment from Qumran that had literally like 4 words on it, and I was making an argument for why it should belong to this manuscript.
And it's like it's
peer-reviewed article.
Yeah,
right.
It's
and
so
like
deep,
nobody has ever cited that one. So all that to say, this is the super hard part, is getting your ideas out there and getting people to take them seriously. So like from the pages and pages of stuff that I've published and had peer reviewed, there's like a handful that scholars regularly cite. Just because most of the stuff that most of us maybe that's the lesson here. Most of the stuff that most of us publish, unless we're like Emmanuel Tove or Dale Allison or Bart Ehrman, most of the stuff that we publish is shit. So
well, so I've got a good test for us. Okay, so I'll give a quick account of who I think the historical Jesus is, and then I want you to be able to steelman the best version of the minimal mythicist position that you can. You think you can do that?
Oh man, I doubt it. But
well, at least explain what Carrier is proposing. In contrast to
I don't know, man. I'm probably gonna get this wrong. And again,
and then it'll be used against.
Not like this is not my thing. My thing is the early Jewish texts. It's not, whether or not Jesus even existed. I think he did, but I don't know. I guess.
So actually, that's a great point. The point is we are not. Okay, we're not critiquing.
Nobody take me seriously about this. Okay.
This is going to be clipped. Hey, GE's fans for watching this clipped video. But anyway, so the understanding I have of Jesus is that he was a first century apocalyptic preacher of sorts, similar to John the Baptist. It is said that he performed miracles, signs, and wonders. At least people believe this. Many moons later, people wrote this down, and he eventually became deified. It says that he was crucified, and that there are accounts of his disciples seeing him after he was crucified. And then this is turned to a religion that was quite diverse at the start, and then when Constantine converted to Christianity, it became less diverse, as Rome had the big daddy perspective of like a reach of Christianity to spread Christianity and their version of Christianity. So that's my understanding of Christianity from like a very lay person's understanding.
And I'm supposed to critique that from
well, no, don't critique it, but like so how does Richard Carrier's understanding differ from that?
I think the starting point for people who hold on to this idea is that the third starting point. Third-party source material for Jesus is sparse to non-existent. And we should expect somebody to have noticed Jesus in early Palestine and have written something about him. The earliest sources that we have for Jesus are the Apostle Paul, and Paul says that at one point in one of his letters that he learned everything that he knew about Jesus from visions and from revelation. So it's clear that he doesn't actually believe in an earthly Jesus so much as he believes in this cosmic, celestial Jesus. The Gospels were then, written later to historicize this figure and to set him within. You're right, Richard. I'm totally wrong about this because this isn't my thing, right? So, like I said, my stuff is early Judaism. Well, I'm gonna totally mess this up, and there you go, guys. You got a clip show. Way to go.
No. It's not necessarily about that, because, like we said at the start, you're critiquing the one part of a very large broad work, but the broad work is essentially that there's this, that the stories written about Jesus were like I don't know the word that was correctly used, but like allegorical, or like they represent what's happening in, I guess, like the cosmic spiritual realm, but they're stories about they're like deified mythologies about Jesus as if he existed on earth, but it's about but in reality Jesus was crucified in heaven and in the cosmic realm and etc. Like this, it's something like that. It's something like that. It's less about Jesus didn't exist, lol. It's actually about like a deified Jesus was like a pre-existing deified God that was like crucified, I guess, in space or in the cosmic realm or something. I'm butchering it just as well as you, but the concept but that's the general concept, right? That Jesus didn't exist, and there was that these things happened in like the spirit realm, in the cosmic realm.
So right, I'm just looking at the comments. And maybe I should say a couple things here. So I don't care if people clip me. That's fine. I mean, this isn't serious. It's YouTube, right? This is not something that. All of this stuff is not something that I'm working on as a scholar. So whatever.
This isn't.
Could I say? So Richard also says, to be fair, Kipp, that you said that in advance, so I'm not criticizing that at all. You honestly haven't gotten to my argument in OHJ yet, and honestly, I'm not. Like I said, I'm mostly interested in the representation of Jewish literature. That's my bag, right? And then I guess I think people were upset with how emotive I guess I can get when speaking about Jewish literature, but when you commit your life to reading stuff and to studying stuff, it's easy to get emotional about it. I mean, I have a course, by the way, on like Israelite religion, and I think anybody who actually has bought the course and watched it will see that I get kind of worked up about this stuff.
So you're very passionate, but I have to just say that this is where I think I kind of warned you against this whole subject at the start. Not saying, but because people take this so personally, and you're like, look, I'm just critiquing the one section. I'm not even critiquing it as a whole. You made this very clear. But of course, even myself, I'm like, let's bring this. Like, how does this affect the greater theory?
I don't know that it does. Like I personally think that it makes it more difficult for the case to be made if you can't ground it more certainly within early Jewish expectation. That's my personal feeling. But But I mean, that's up to people to decide. All I'm interested in is whether or not the Jewish literature is given its what's the word I'm looking for?
Like day in court, it's correct. It's correct.
Yeah, given its day, given like has the literature spoken for itself? And this is something that I found very frustrating through the section of the book that I have read, which is on Jewish literature. Is that there's plenty of suggestions about what the texts say. There's a handful of summaries of what the texts say, but there's never any actual direct citations or quotations of what the texts actually say. And I think if, like, I've approached the videos in the way that I would have as a peer reviewer. And if I was peer reviewing this book, this is what my recommendation would have been. I would have said, cite the texts, show us what the texts say, then talk to us about what needs to happen in the text in order to get them to the point, in order to arrive at the point of having them say what you want them to say. And I guess maybe now is a good time to talk about, I had hoped to talk about something that I know a little bit about. I don't know much, but I know a little bit about the Dead Sea Scrolls. And in particular, one of the texts that Richard marshals in his hope to establish the presence of a suffering, dying messianic figure in early Judaism is 11Q13. So, yes, Godless Engineer, I've read all the footnotes, and I have to say I'm not altogether that impressed with a lot of them. But
that's the one critic. I know that you haven't seen. I know that you haven't seen any of the live streams GE and Richard have done, or any of the videos GE's put out. But the biggest point that they seem to make is that you haven't read the footnotes, but you're saying you have read the footnotes.
I have, and I'm not, and it is kind of a confusing. It's kind of a confusing critique on my part, or sorry, a confusing critique from my perspective. I think one of the, and a lot of this conversation too, I think, has to do with, and another one of my critiques of the work itself is that my sense of the way that Richard is approaching early Judaism is, it feels like he's approaching it like an evangelical Christian, actually. It's kind of a, I mean, I hate to say that. No, I don't want to say that.
That's a low blow, dude. That's a.
I'm sorry, man. No. It's, like, how do I? Well, I mean, for example, and I get into this in the third video. You know, it feels like one of the things it feels like is happening within the book is he's making this big deal, this sharp distinction between, you know, the cosmic realm and the mortal realm. And crazy, like, there's people, you know, in the cosmic realm. What's that about? That has to be celestial beings, because why would you have celestial beings in the cosmic realm? And I mean, the fact of the matter is that, like, within early Judaism, this was not all that odd or weird. This is something that normal people, it happened to normal people. It's something that they did and wrote about, apparently. Like, within the Dead Sea Scrolls community, within the Qumran community, they were convinced that they were regularly within the presence of angels. These are ordinary people communing with angels. One of the
back in youth group.
Right.
100%.
So
yeah, like,
but like one of the The Kentucky Mule's getting to me. So one of the reasons for this extremely stringent purification rituals within the Qumran sect is because they are convinced that they're surrounded by angels all the time. Within the War Scroll, there's like a whole section of like purity regulations that you have to observe, because you just don't know if in the last days, when you've pitched your tent in the camp of the Sons of Light, whether your camp's going to be next to your buddy Harold or next to the Archangel Gabriel. You don't know that. So you got to make sure that you are ritually pure in order to, even be able to be in the presence of these divine beings. And I get the sense when I read the book that's not understood and it's not clearly presented. But I think maybe now is a good time to talk a little bit. And this is something I do in my second video. Now is a good time to talk a little bit about 11Q13, the so-called Melchizedek scroll, and some of my problems with Richard's representation of 11Q13. So maybe I'll share my screen.
That'd be great. Yeah, that'd be awesome. How does Richard, Dr. Carrier, how does he represent the scroll versus first?
Okay, should we read it?
Yeah,
let's look at it.
Let's do it.
Okay, so here's the section, if I can ever find it. There we go. Okay, so here I have he's got a paragraph, couple paragraphs about 11Q13, and this is what he says. But of the more specific notion of a dying Messiah, we also have other pre-Christian evidence in the form of the Dead Sea Scrolls designated 11Q13 and Melchizedek scroll. He's got a footnote there, guys. I want you to make sure you see me checking this footnote. Note 36, he mentions 11Q13, column 2, 18 to 20. It's actually fragment 1, column 2, 18 to 20. For the scroll's text translation and notes, see Alex Jason, who wrote an excellent book on prophecy within Second Temple Judaism. And he is at New York University. He's got John Seitz Bergma, who also wrote a very good book about the concept of Jubilee within early Judaism. He's got, I didn't actually get a chance to look at this one. Christian Menzentin. He's written this German book on sorry, my German sucks. Isaiah. It looks like Isaiah interpretations in the usage of Isaiah in Quran. Also, this text by my friend Martin Abegg, Messianic Hope and 4Q285, a reassessment, which was published in the Journal of Biblical Literature in 1994, and then an article published by Laura Guglielmo, 11Q13, Melchizedek co-reference and restoration of column 2, line 18 in Henoch 33, and the response by Darrell Bach in the same issue. Henoch, by the way, is the publication of the Enoch Seminar, which is a group of scholars and PhD students who get together like every year in, it's usually in Italy. And they have a conference discussing aspects of Second Temple Judaism as they pertain to Enochic Judaism. So that's the footnote. He's basically cited all these different sources for the text, the translation and the notes on this particular scroll. What was frustrating to me is that he doesn't mention any of the textual controversies with regards to this text. He assumes a lot. So he continues, this is an apocalyptic pesher, a document attempting to discover hidden messages in the scriptures by finding secret links among disparate and previously unrelated verses. See elements 8 and 16 for the coming Messiah to defeat evil and the end of the world. There are many such pesherim at Qumran. This one tells about a messenger of Isaiah 52 to 53. Importantly, as I point out in my video, when it comes to evaluating Second Temple Jewish literature, in particular with regards to their handling of texts, we can't assume just because a specific verse from a larger section of text has been quoted that the writer intends to or has a developed theology about the entire section. So within the Melchizedek scroll, the only part of Isaiah of the servant songs in Isaiah 52 to 53 that's cited is Isaiah 52 verse 7, I believe. So, and all that tells us is that the author of this text was interested in what this particular, literally this sentence, had to say. With no consideration for the rest of Isaiah 52 and 53. This is pretty common rudimentary stuff within early Judaism. So right away, I would say it's a mistake to posit that this text is about the messenger of Isaiah 52 to 53. No, this is about what Isaiah says about, or second Isaiah says about the messenger in Isaiah 52 verse 7, and that's it. Who is linked in Isaiah with a servant who will die and atone for everyone's sins. And I think that's extremely speculative. Messaging God's final victory, which, as we have already seen, later Jews definitely regarded as the Messiah. Sure, but we're talking about the Jews at this period. At Qumran 11Q13 appears to say that this messenger is the same man as the Messiah of Daniel 9, who dies around the same time at the end. Time and end to sin is said to be accomplished, again, presaging God's final victory, and that the day in which this happens will be a great and final day of atonement, absolving the sins of all the elect, after which 11Q13 goes on to say God and his Savior will overthrow all demonic forces, and all this will proceed according to the timetable in Daniel 9. Thus, 11Q13 appears to predict that a Messiah will die, and that this will mark the final days before which God's agents will defeat Belial, Satan, which I don't think is an equivalent representation, and atone for the sins of the elect. So what Richard doesn't tell you is that this particular reading of this particular text is highly controversial, and that the vast majority of scholars do not adopt this particular reading of this particular text. So, okay, I should probably just stop paying attention to the chat, but I want to show you. I want to show you how this works. Okay, if I can.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I probably should have opened this up earlier. Am I still sharing my screen?
No, but I'll bring it up when I can see.
Okay. When I open it, I will let you know. Okay. So, and I like to do this. So right away, I want to say, when it comes to fragmentary manuscripts, like two things. Fragmentary manuscripts are super fun because they're fragmentary, and you can kind of do what you want with them, right?
Yeah.
But then fragmentary texts are super frustrating because you can never know what's actually going on in this text. But as someone who has worked most of his life with fragmentary manuscripts, I will say that, and I will say with regards to this particular manuscript, which I think Richard just gets dead wrong. We can know for certain a couple of things, I think, or maybe not certain, but I would say with a substantial amount of confidence, we can know a couple of things. So I'm just going to bring this up here. Are we sharing my screen yet?
Yeah, I can share my screen. There we go.
Okay, there we go. So here is the fragments in question. And I'm going to point out, when it comes to reading text like this, unfortunately, the stuff that I have put the arrows and the question marks, like, we don't know what's there. We can make educated guesses about what's there. And sometimes the writers of these texts have done us the favor of identifying, like in this particular text, there's a number of places where the author has identified citations of previously known texts. So, oh, whoops. I didn't realize my computer's not plugged in. Sorry. Let me fix that.
Today's been the day for technical difficulties. It's been the
right.
Go for today. Yeah.
We're all good now, though, because my computer's plugged in. So all this stuff is missing. We have a good idea of what's there some of the time because, you know, the author's quoted or cited a text that we know, and we can, you know, fill the blank space with what we think is there, and it works. Yay, that's good. So importantly, the author of this text has cited Isaiah chapter 61 and then Isaiah chapter 52 verse 7, which makes reference to a Mashiach HaRuach, the anointed one of the Spirit. And then he says, this is the same figure. And I know the translation here gets, it gets conjectural. This is the same figure, according to what Daniel the prophet says. And unfortunately, we have the beginning of the name Daniel, but then virtually the entire quotation from Daniel is very frustratingly missing. I've highlighted that in red. When it comes to reconstructing this text, it's important. So here, I've marked out the lines for us. Can you see that clearly enough? Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I've marked out, importantly, where we think the margins are. You can see, remember, you're reading Hebrew from right to left. So you can see on the right side a nice clean. It's supposed to be clean and straight, but it's an old manuscript, so it's a little off. You can see the right margin where the scribe has begun his line. So notice I've put in a second and third vertical line, yellow lines on the left-hand side to indicate the end of what I've identified as column 2 and the beginning of column 3. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is what your column looks like. And this is everything that you can fit into that column. You'll notice also when it comes to the left edge of the column that it's not justified because, of course, it's not. The scribe is doing his best to write between the margins, but sometimes he's going to go over, sometimes it's going to be a little bit under, but he's got a sense of where that margin is, and he's trying to stick with it. So based on these features, we can make educated guesses about what's in the available space. So, and let's be honest, the scribe could have written anything he wanted there. For all we know, why does it say, oh, there we go. Sorry. I just plugged in again. That should be good. For all we know, the scribe could have written this. Can you read that, David?
Dave McDonald will have a YouTube channel, and what does that say?
Never mind. That says that actually is Daniel in Hebrew.
Oh, okay. And he will cut anyone off who drinks too much. Yeah.
So, I mean, that could have been there.
True.
Right? I mean, there's
the teapot orbiting Saturn.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. It could be one.
It might be problem. And this, I'll make a point of this too. This is at least, is also taking into consideration the meaning of the verse in Daniel 9:26, where it says the Messiah will be cut off, right? And you're a messenger. You're a messenger delivering information to the people in the all over the world. I don't know. So that's, I guess, possible on some level. It would be very surprising to me.
It'd be very surprising. Not only is it unplausible because it's
English,
talking about me in English, but it also goes across the the margin there.
Yeah, right. So the scribe probably didn't write that. Okay. Most scholars think that the scribe wrote this. And what this is a reference to Daniel 9, verse 25, which says that it says, until Messiah the Prince, it is 7 weeks. And then it goes on to talk about the bearer of good news. Okay, so that's what most scholars think is there. Now, you'll notice with this citation of the text, there is no dying Messiah. Can't be there. It's not there. Okay. It has been suggested by some scholars that it's actually with reference to verse 26, which says, after, sorry, too drunk for this. After 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off. Do you see a problem with this reconstruction?
Yeah, it's red, where the rest is black ink. No, it goes right across the. It goes right across the margin.
Too big. It's just too big, so it doesn't work. It doesn't fit. I've seen a handful of arguments from scholars for positing something like this, but I don't find any of them convincing, just because the space, it's not a lot of space. You've got at best 5 words to work with to talk about what's going on here.
And let me just, for people in the chat, let me just reiterate this. That I probably should have reiterated even stronger before. Richard Carrier has said, note, by the way, all he's talking about is just a single paragraph on the history of Jesus, which I don't use as evidence against the historicity of Jesus.
I don't care.
I can see the dispute. This doesn't matter. This isn't. We're not critiquing. We're not critiquing the book. We're critiquing.
My complaint is that you've misrepresented the text, Richard. That's my complaint. And it's not the only one. You've misrepresented plenty of these Jewish texts. That's the problem.
This is Kipp is just focusing on one thing, which is his area of expertise. So that's I just want to make that clear for everyone, which is what Rich is pointing out, and which is what I should have pointed out clearer before. But yes.
Okay, and maybe this doesn't matter to many people, but this matters to some people. This matters to me as a specialist in early Judaism. This matters to my colleagues who are specialists in early Judaism. We would prefer if the texts are properly represented when people write about them. So I've actually suggested, because this is a bit of a quandary, and it's gotten me interested in this text again. And one of the guys, another Second Temple Judaism scholar, who's actually doing some work on this manuscript right now, he and I have been chatting back and forth about this text. I actually suggested my own possible reconstruction for this text, which is always dangerous, just because, like I said, it could be almost anything. And I've discovered this too, as somebody who works on fragmentary manuscripts all the time. Something I have discovered is when you actually do find out what the missing text means, I'm not kidding, 99% of the time, it's different than what you guessed it was. It's crazy.
Oh, really?
Like, yeah, I'm not kidding. This happens constantly. Actually, when it came to the forgeries, the Dead Sea Scrolls forgeries in private collections, one of the things that, I mean, if people are interested, there was a documentary on Nova about this. There've been a number of articles written about this. But there's a pile of evidence for why the fragments at Scoians and the Museum of the Bible and the Zoo Pacific and Southwestern are modern forgeries. But one of the things that was tipping us off was the fact that many of the places where these fragments filled in missing gaps of text for which we didn't have ancient witnesses, like they magically aligned with suggestions that were made by modern scholars for what was missing in the text. I remember clearly one of my colleagues, his name is Orstein Jusnes, was working on the books of Enoch and the fragments of Enoch from Qumran. And he kept on telling me as he was working on these, he said, so the guy who did all the definitive work on this up to like the 1980s or the 90s was a brilliant scroll scholar by the name of J.T. Milik, Polish scholar, a legitimate polymath, like just a super brilliant guy. And Orstein kept on telling me in our, just daily conversation as he's working through these fragments, he's like, I can't believe what a genius J.T. Milik was, because he's got all these places in his reconstructions of Dead Sea Scrolls fragmentary text where he's made suggestions of what he thinks is there, right, in the fragment, and he's like, right 100% of the time, because we've got these fragments now which contain this text, and oh look, it aligns perfectly with what Milik suggested. Yeah, this is kind of an on the nose indication that there's something fishy about this fragment. So all that to say, it's always dangerous when it comes to making your own suggestions about what might be there in the text. So I have actually suggested that I think this aligns somewhat closely. It's a little bit awkward in the Hebrew with what I think this aligns with the spirit of what the whole text is about, which I think is important. This text is about calculating the end of the age and things that are going to happen leading up to the arrival of this figure, Melchizedek, who will in some way make atonement for the sins of the elect, at least possibly the whole world. So with that in view, I think this is a better representation of what was probably in this fragment. And the reason I like this is because it focuses the attention on what the rest of the text is about. It's about the calendar. So what I've suggested is this is the messenger, the anointed of the Spirit, according to what Daniel the prophet said, after 7 and 62 weeks, and there will be an announcement of good news, because it sets the focus on the key thing for the author, which is the time period, right? So as my friend and mentor Marty Abegg said, with regards to this text, which is an article that Richard supposedly read because he cites it, Marty says, because he adopts the majority reading, as most scroll scholars do, they adopt a reading which aligns with Daniel 9:25 as opposed to Daniel 9:26. And Marty says in his article that he wrote in 1994 with regards to this particular manuscript, we should not be making definitive statements about what this text says based on what's not there. I think that's super key. So, and that's basically what Richard is doing in his invocation of this text by calling it one in which, where does he say this again? So, which presents the specific notion of a dying Messiah. Yes, he hedges this. He says it may be there, it may not be there, but I think a better approach would be to present the text, to discuss the issues, and let people decide for themselves about what's there in the text. So, and honestly, that's my biggest problem with a lot of this, is just the misrepresentation of what's actually in the text and what they actually do say. I think it's important.
With all due respect, maybe like a lot of to Richard is a lot of people. I hear a lot of complaints that people don't understand your work,
maybe,
or they're misunderstanding it, or you've said it in the comments about 10 times. Not about 10 times, it's hyperbole, but you've said a bunch of times that people are misquoting your work, misusing it, not understanding it, don't read the footnotes. I don't know if On the History needs a rewrite so that people can understand it, but like, it's either that people are being bad faith in reading it, or that the message wasn't portrayed clearly, because this seems to be an ongoing criticism of anyone that critiques any one part of your work, is that they don't understand it as a whole.
This is my criticism.
Yeah.
So just cite the text, show us what they say, and then work us through how you arrive at your readings. Because I don't know. I feel like Richard is complaining that I missed something, and I wish he could show me what I missed here. I mean, he says that this is, you don't cite the text, Richard. You should probably cite the text.
Because it's my understanding, Richard does cite the text in other places, just not in the places that you've been pointing out are contentious, right?
Yeah, I'm certainly not.
Which seems suspicious.
I'm frustrated that he didn't actually cite the Talmudim texts, which he depends on. I'm frustrated that he didn't actually cite Wisdom of Solomon, which he depends on. I'm frustrated that he didn't cite 11Q13, which, he depends on to make his case. And like I said, I don't care about whether this has anything, any bearing on the validity of minimum mythicism. That's another issue altogether. I'm just interested in the representation of the Jewish literature, and I think it's poor.
One thing that I spoke about, I've totally forgotten everything we talked about.
So here, okay. So listen, yeah. I mean, he has mentioned this here. Not all scholars have recognized this in 11Q13 or conceded it. Yeah, but what's there and what's not there, Richard? Like, have you discussed the reasons why people haven't conceded this? Which I think are important. And when you get to the reasons, and I think it's important to note that the vast majority of scholars who actually work with these fragmentary Aramaic Hebrew manuscripts in the Dead Sea Scrolls are in large agreement about what this text does and does not say. And that's the discussion that I think is missing. So
one of the things that we spoke about, I spoke about with Gnostic Informant, was Isaiah 53, and because it was like it was a little bit of a slam dunk to kind of find out that Isaiah 53 isn't talking about a Messiah, that Isaiah 53 isn't talking about that the suffering servant isn't the Messiah, it's actually Israel. That was kind of like one of the first things I learned when deconstructing my faith. But mythicists say, no, Isaiah 53 is talking about a Messiah figure that's coming.
It's very interesting to me. That's the other thing that I find quite interesting is many of the same arguments I see coming from mythicists are those that are echoed by evangelical Christians with regards to, in particular, with regards to Isaiah 52 and 53. So And sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I was just going. No, you're fine. I was just going to just ask about Isaiah 53 and the text Sanhedrin B, which is part of the Talmud, which you discuss in video 1, I think it is. Which, by the way, guys, check out. Like, if you haven't, I'm sure most of you have, and you're here. But if you want a deeper dive into this kind of stuff, Kipp's videos on this are great. And you're about to release you've just released 2, and you're about to release number 3. or not, but you're about to release. I've seen number 3. So, yeah, number 2's just been released. Number 3 is coming out soon, hopefully. If you don't get bullied off the internet,
I might.
But so, like I said, like there's so much. There's just this subject just invites so much drama, and if anyone needs evidence for that, look at the comments section. But but yeah, so with Isaiah 53, like, is in your perspective as a scholar, is the suffering servant in Isaiah 53 the Messiah?
So one of the things that I think is important to point out is when you say Messiah, people have like a preformed idea of what that means.
Mm-hmm.
And I've made this point in a number of my videos and a number of my live appearances that for a text to be to be considered messianic, there's nothing particularly, it's not a magical thing. Like, it's not virtually any text that any Jewish person found useful with regards to their expectation of the Messiah was then considered messianic. So that's the first thing. Now, the way in which early Jews read many of these texts in terms of their messianic import is also really important. One of the I would say that in the pre-Christian era, we just don't know. Based on what we have from the texts and how we're dating a lot of these sources, it's really conjectural. So a lot of people will point to echoes of Isaiah 52 and 53 in some of the Qumran texts, which appear to be messianic. And again, it's really conjectural. It's not clear. There's ongoing debates among scholars within the guild about this. I personally tend to think that, I'll say one other thing about Isaiah and the Dead Sea Scrolls. So this was an apocalyptic Jewish movement. This was a group of apocalyptic Jews who were actively convinced that they were living in the last days and were mining the texts of their scriptures to, tell them about what that meant. One of the interesting things that we discover when we look within the Qumran literature and how they are handling, in particular, Isaiah 52 and 53, is that there's almost no reflection on it. So, and I've always said, of course it's possible. And, I have no doubt that some of these connections were being made loosely by, we can't account for everyone, right? So maybe there were these sorts of connections that were being made. And I tend to think probably just on the basis of the fact that early Christians really latched on to Isaiah 52 and 53, the servant songs, and applied them to the Messiah. But importantly, like, the textual data is very, very fuzzy. Like, it's not clear. It's really not. One of the problems here too, I think, has to do with the dating of a lot of this stuff. Richard leans into the Talmudim, which are quite late. And as much as certain scholars are keen to push many of these Talmudic traditions back farther than the pre-Christian period, we just don't have the evidence for that. So it's an open question. I think maybe that's a good way to underscore one of the things that I hope people come away from this with is recognizing that this is all really, really complicated stuff. Like, it's not a hard and fast, it's not easy to do this work, working in these early texts and with this early literature, right? And frustratingly, we don't have simple, straightforward answers. Oh, there's Rabbi Yonatan ben Uziel. I'm wondering when Godless Engineer thinks that dates to, because, like, so something that Godless Engineer has brought up here in the chat is the Targum Jonathan of the prophets, which is an Aramaic translation / paraphrase of the Hebrew Bible. The Targum Jonathan is dated to, Bruce Chilton has done a ton of work on this, and he at first proposed layers within the Targum Jonathan and suggested that the earliest of these layers exist somewhere between 70 and 132 CE. So this is still post-Christian. Those are the earliest layers. If that's, like, it's still super late. And moreover, I encourage people to go and look and see what the writer has done with the servant songs in Isaiah 52 and 53 in Targum Jonathan, because he sure is not a suffering servant. Yes, it's messianic in that somebody has adapted this text to speak about the last days, which is not unusual. This is something that Jews did with all sorts of texts. But he's now suddenly turned the suffering servant into this triumphant royal figure who's kicking everyone's ass. This
is something that I found confusing, because if this is supposed to be pre-Christian ideas, we don't have anything for so okay, let me just share my screen. So I know that you don't watch any of these videos, but GE did a video on you about this, okay? And I responded because I watched it last night to try and get some notes to bring some questions. And I said, "Hey John, I have no dog in this back and forth. No dog in the fight, I guess. But as you may know, I'm interviewing Dr. Kipp shortly. I was watching this video to prepare some tough questions for him, and I liked what you said about Sanhedrin 98b. Okay. I looked up the dating of the Google, and Google seems to suggest it's 300 to 600 AD. That is well into Christianity's history, where the ideas of Isaiah 53 being about the Messiah were commonplace. My question, is it accurate, or do we have non-verbal sources prior to Jesus? The Talmud dates late, but records early traditions of the Jewish rabbis. You can even ask Kipp this, but the Talmud records rabbinic discussions on scripture going back to 20 BCE time period. Those texts or oral teachings aren't available to us in now except through the Talmud. So while it does not date, it records earlier teachings. But my problem with this, and maybe you can talk a little bit about this and I'll shut up, but this is a very specific piece of scripture that's used to talk about Isaiah 53 and the coming and rising and the Messiah figure, sorry. You can't then say there's one scripture written, again, between 300 to 600 AD, which is what, I don't know, this could be wrong, but this is what Google seemed to suggest to me, and Godless didn't correct it, that this oral tradition that has to be interpreted stuck around for that 300 years wasn't influenced by Christianity, wasn't influenced by anything, and then we don't see it all through the rest of the literature. In like, if Isaiah 53, is this the only thing mentions Isaiah 53, or are there other sources that talk about this that don't have anything to do with Isaiah 53 being?
Listen, the Talmudim are vast. Like I haven't. It's not something I work with, right? And I was actually really nervous about publishing that first video, just because I have friends who are Talmud scholars who I thought might see it, and I was really concerned about how they were going to respond to, did I get it right? They seemed to think it was okay. But I don't know about the extent of use of Isaiah 53 throughout the Talmudim. But one of the things I want to point out is that while there may be some traditions recorded within the Talmud that you can date back to the Tannaitic period, which is, so I'm using a technical term here. This is the period of the Mishnah. This is the period of the earliest rabbis. There may be some traditions that you can date back that far. You certainly can't date all of them back that far. And I think importantly, one of the things with it, and I mentioned this within my video, the first video that I did, Sanhedrin 98b actually provides us with a sense on when we can set this particular tradition with regards to Isaiah 53, because it mentions Judah Hanasi, Judah the prince, who was a rabbi, and his student, the leper. So Judah the prince lived between, I think it's like 130 to 200?
Let me just check my note. Oh, I have no idea. I have no idea.
So, but he's a second century figure. So this particular tradition,
has to be after that.
I think if you're going to attempt to push that back farther, I'd like to see some evidence for that. And I don't. So, and I know, like, Richard has cited scholars to suggest that, yes, you can push this tradition back earlier. And I would say, of the scholars that I've read on this point, I would like to see some better evidence for that.
And again, this is a criticism unfounded in any type of expertise. But this, you know how, like, you see those movies and someone's trying to work out who the murderer is, and they got like lines and corkboard with all these different. That's what this feels like a little bit. And something that GE said at the start of one of the videos is, to him it makes perfect logical sense, and he doesn't see how anyone can't essentially be a mythicist, is the message he was kind of getting across. But for me, I go, okay, well, if that's the case, there's a few options. Either you don't understand it, the historicity of Jesus fully enough, that you've been convinced of this, or there is another motivation for why thousands of Bible scholars around the world don't even pay attention to this kind of idea. And to me, that level of conspiracy is like moon landing levels of, like, thousands of people working together in conjunction. It just seems a very hard pill to swallow for me.
Sorry, I was half listening, David. I wanted to. So Richard mentioned a couple of sources, Martin Hengel and Daniel Boyarin. So I thought one of the things I think is important to point out is because this is some of the pushback that I have gotten, is that people seem to think I'm suggesting that Isaiah 53 isn't messianic, and that's not the point. If I made this point poorly, I apologize for that, but that's not the point that I was trying to make. And one of the problems here is this term, messianic. What do we mean by that? what did it mean to the people who read these texts in the 1st century BC, in the 1st century CE? Because I think that's really where some of the disconnect is. Like this notion that, yes, I will concede that there's a possibility. And well, I mean, we have the New Testament, which seems to make use of Isaiah 53 as a messianic text in the 1st century CE, right? So clearly somebody was making this connection. But what did they mean by that? And just because they saw it connected to Jesus, does this mean that every single Jewish person understood these texts, or even the majority of Jewish people understood these texts in similar ways? So one of the things within I mentioned earlier this book by Alex Jason called Mediating the Divine, where he does like a deep dive on the idea of prophecy within the Dead Sea Scrolls in particular. And I think one of the very important discoveries that he makes, and I particularly like this idea from within his book, is that this term, Mashiach, which means anointed one, which comes to mean Messiah, within the Dead Sea Scrolls, far and away, most of the time, this is with reference to prophets. This is just a way you talk about prophets. So it's interesting when you read the scrolls, because you start seeing Mashiachim, the plural form. You start seeing messiahs popping up all over the place. It's a fairly well-used term, and based on Jason's research, by and large, this is meant to indicate prophets of Yahweh as anointed figures. The word itself just means anointed one, right? So when it comes to reading a lot of this literature, and understanding what's going on in it, like when we talk about Isaiah 52 and 53 as messianic texts, sure, in that people read these texts and saw elements within them which spoke to their present day, or to what they understood to take place in the last days. That's what messianic means. It doesn't mean that they always, or even mostly, or ever understood the suffering servant to be, the king that Yahweh was going to promote to usher in the new age. There's all sorts of ways people, they work with these texts, and it's really, really complicated, and it's not clear.
What do you think about?
Before we continue, I'm just wondering, should I get another Kentucky rule, or should I?
Yeah, well, let's go. How about get it? But how about we can kind of, I guess, finish off, or like kind of round out the interview talking about like dichotomy of like what's happening on Earth versus what's happening in the celestial realm.
Okay,
or do you not want to talk about that?
We can talk a little bit about that, I guess. Yeah.
Or do you have something?
You think I should get another drink?
Yeah, if you want to. Yeah, we can do that, and I'll shout out your stuff. So go grab another drink, and I'll shout out your stuff, guys. If you obviously check out let me just share the tab. Kipp's series is amazing, but he's also has this amazing series on the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is really, really good. It's the kind of thing you just sit down. Hang on, where was it? There was, for someone who doesn't video edit and video edits on iMovie, like this stuff is like really good. Look at that stuff. That's so cool. So really great stuff over there. And Dr. Kipp also has a course on MVP courses, and there's a link in the description. And if you sign up through that link, it actually helps Deep Drinks as well, because I'm an affiliate of the program now, which is really cool. Like Derek's really helped us out there. And of course, if you want to support this channel, let me just show you guys the secret sauce, okay? if you want to help support this channel, Deep Drinks has a Patreon, and the Patreon, I'm just dropping interview after interview after interview. These are exclusive interviews that will only be shown here because they're part of a raw. They're raw. They're unfiltered. They're nothing polished. Okay, but they're interviews that we're doing for a little Judaism documentary, and this is the rough cut. Oh, you can. Can you give us like I guess an overview of who Abraham was and the Abrahamic covenant in relation, like something that you might. So the quality is not the best right here, but and then contrast that with history.
So
we got in other words, that's a sneak peek. If you want to watch the full rough cut of the opening, you'll have to go check out the Patreon. But a Deep Drinks documentary is coming out on the history of Judaism, which will be really cool. Which is it's got all got Dr. Kill in it, so go check that out. But with that said, I think Dr. Kipp is back with his.
I am back with my second Kentucky.
You got some cool glasses.
These? Yeah, these are nice. Yeah. Unfortunately, they went through the dishwasher, so they're. It probably doesn't. Oh, yeah. They don't look as the coating on them or whatever rubbed off, and they're metal, so like they're freezing cold when you're more hot. But I wanted to point out. Richard in the chat mentioned Jason Staples, who talks about this, and I think about the pre-Christian ideas about the suffering servant, and I think again it's important to point out a lot of these non-scroll scholars who promote this idea are depending on the way certain scholars are reading the scrolls. So, and again, like I'm going to tell you, among scroll scholars, this is pretty conjectural. It's far from settled. There are plenty of scroll scholars who deny that there is any suffering servant in pre-Christian Judaism. But I also wanted to point out that he mentions that Staples cites William Brownlee, the servant of the Lord in the Qumran Scrolls, and William Brownlee was my Dr. Fodder, George J. Brooks' Dr. Fodder. So he's like my Dr. Gross Fodder. He's sorry.
What does that mean?
Oh, so my doctor George Brooke was my PhD supervisor.
Okay.
At the University of Manchester, and William Brownlee was George Brooks' PhD supervisor back at Claremont Grad School in the 1980s. So sorry, I just had to say that. So yeah, okay. What are we doing now?
Well, I thought you could. So you mentioned at the start actually that you gave you built when you're a PhD student, possibly you wrote about the historicity of Jesus. Now I know this isn't
on the internet.
Okay. Well, like how would you build the case for? I mean, and this is kind of separate to what the main part of the stream is about, which is about Jewish texts and reading these early Jewish texts. But how would you kind of talk about a historical Jesus in context of what we're talking about?
So I think I guess I would say that sorry. I guess my view, my vision of an historical Jesus is, as I mentioned before, apocalyptic, Jewish, charismatic, who came probably from Galilee, somewhere in the north, who caused a stir in Jerusalem at festival time, got himself killed. I think we can know almost, or I think we can be. I mean, even saying we can know is problematic, but I would say that's the best we can do from an historical perspective of who this person was. But I think positing the existence of this person makes certainly good sense of all the information that we have of the early Jewish background, and the bits and pieces that we know of early Christianity, in particular with regards to Paul. And I think that all of the third party external source material is easily explained on the basis of there being an actual guy. So now, having said that, I will also say that like the Gospels themselves are hugely problematic because they're theological documents. They're not histories, right? And I don't think there's anything within them that is particularly credible. I'm undecided about a lot of it, but bear in mind I don't spend tons of time in gospel literature either, right? But I will say that when I read the Gospels, there are some, there's pockets of information within there. When I read it, I think, yeah, that makes good sense within the Judaism that I know of the first century.
And you mentioned this a little bit in the interviews that we did on Patreon, and you will be talking about it hopefully in the it'll make the cut on the cutting room floor for the documentary. But that Jesus there was there were different sects of Judaism at the time, and you kind of relate Jesus to one of the sects more than the others. So we talk a little bit about the Pharisees, who the Pharisees were, the Sadducees, the Zealots, the Essenes. Actually, do you want to give a quick overview of those different groups as a taster, and then we can talk?
Yeah. Okay. So within, how do I start this? Starting from, and one of the problems with the New Testament, with the Gospels, is that when you start there, as source information for early Judaism, you're already getting a problematic perspective. So people will notice that when they read the Gospels, there's these Jewish groups. We have a fair, I even hesitate to say that, but we certainly have a more monolithic version of Judaism in our modern world. And this is what was inherited from rabbinic Judaism. But this is all stuff that happened after the destruction of the temple and the city of Jerusalem in 70 CE. At that point, there were many Jewish groups, Jewish sects, Jewish expressions, ways of expressing your Jewishness. I'll recommend at this point, and one of my favorite books currently on early Judaism is Jonathan Adler's book in I think it's in the Anchor Yale resource series, where he tracks how far back we can trace Judaism. But one of the things that we see is that prior to the destruction of the temple, there were a variety of expressions of this worldview, this religion, whatever you want to call it, this culture. They go by various distinctions. We know, and we see some of this within the Gospels. We know of the Pharisees. We know of the Sadducees, certainly. Or I got that backwards, didn't I? We know of the Sadducees and we know of the Pharisees, certainly. The Gospels hate them both, but they really hate the Pharisees. So many people, I think, for a long time, many people's perspectives of who the Pharisees were deeply colored by what the Gospels had to say about them. I
have a family member who likens them to the religious police of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, that's such a wrong perspective of who these people were. Like, so this is the way the Gospels portray them, but the Pharisees were an enormously popular, and they were a populist group. So prior to the destruction of Jerusalem, the Jewish religion was centered on the temple, the sacrifices, the rituals. These usually were controlled by a group known as the Zadokites, the sons of Zadok, the sons of Aaron, or as the Gospels and as Josephus identifies them, the Sadducees. So this was a group of aristocratic Jewish elites. These were like the super rich people who, were the power brokers in the region. They were also the ones who were the accommodationists with Rome, right? These were the guys who were making nice with the Roman emperor in order to maintain some sort of some semblance of Jewish sovereignty. And they were fixed, they were focused on the temple, what's happening in the temple, and the ritualistic expression of Judaism in the temple. In very, very simple perspectives, we would identify these people as conservatives, which is a little weird too, because this is also where a lot of the Hellenization that entered Judaism, this is kind of where it came in. So Pharisaism as a movement is something that, and I'm probably gonna get this wrong in terms of the timing, but I think this is something that started to emerge in the 3rd, maybe the 2nd century BCE, and it was a populist movement because it was a way of addressing the question of how can we be Jews without being, temple worshiping Jews, because this was a huge problem. There's only one temple. It's in Jerusalem. There's Jews now spread all over prior to the Roman Empire, there's Jews spread all over the Mediterranean world. And even within Jerusalem and, the Yehud proper, your participation in the Jewish cult was extremely limited when it comes to the temple. Not everybody can just go into the temple. Not everybody can, enter into the court of Jewish men, which is, as close as you can get to the temple, unless you're one of the members of this elite establishment of aristocratic Jews. So Pharisaism really started as a way of answering the question of how can we be observant Jews without being Sadducees. And through the Pharisees, there came a concerted focus on what they identified as halakha, which is, and that's just the literal translation of that is something like walking. It's based on the verb meaning to walk. This is how you enter into the way of performing Judaism. And the way to do so, according to the Pharisees, was through strict observance of the Torah, the first 5 books, which were thought to have been written by Moses. And so what the Pharisees did was they developed a system of religious observance based on the Torah, but adapted to, current contemporary concerns. That's where it came from. So really, I want to stress this. This was a populist movement. This was a movement of the people, which is why it was extremely popular. The synagogues, which were houses of prayer and study, emerged from this movement of Pharisaism because you can't just go to the temple all the time. And this is sort of their point, and their focus is, instead of offering sacrifices all the time in the temple, let's focus on the Torah, and let's focus on being observant in terms of our subscription to the law, to the word of God, for lack of a better term. So I would say, like right at the outset, the Gospels get this totally wrong, because they portray the Pharisees. And this is, I think one of the reasons for this is because this is written, after the fact, in the post-temple period, when interestingly, so one of the things that happens with the destruction of Jerusalem is we've got all these Jewish sects. We've got the elites, the Sadducees. We've got the Pharisees, this very, very popular, widespread sect of Jews who are operating in accordance with halakha. You've got the Essenes, who we know through the Dead Sea Scrolls. They're also mentioned by Philo and by Josephus. And they're probably more similar to the Sadducees or the Sadducites than they are to the Pharisees in terms of their thoughts on ritual purity and the crucial significance of the temple. Very interestingly, one of the texts that we have within the Dead Sea Scrolls is, there's several copies of something called the Halakhic Letter. The Hebrew title for it is Ma'aseh Matzeh HaTorah, which is some of the works of the law. And this is, it sounds like a letter that was written to justify the thought of this particular movement, the Essenes, in response to their opponents, who we tend to think are the Pharisees, on the basis of how many of how this letter is responding. So, and basically, what the halakhic letter from Qumran is saying is, you Pharisees are just way too soft and fuzzy in terms of your observance of the law and the sacrifices, and you're not nearly hardcore enough for us, so you're probably on the outs. I'm okay with God, but I don't know what Yahweh is going to do with you. So it's like, so this is the Essenes, as far as we know from what Josephus tells us, what Philo tells us, what we read within the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I need to point out that there is still also conjecture within scholarly discussions about how, scholars think this is representative of the Essenes, but also, there were sects within the Essenes. So this was, scholars tend to talk about the literature of the Dead Sea Scrolls as belonging to the Yachad Essenes, or the Qumran Essenes, because this appears to be their particular expression of Essene Judaism. As if it didn't get complicated enough. And there's other groups. We tend to think that there was a. Go ahead.
I was going to ask, where was John the Baptist? Where would he have fit in all of this?
He kind of sounds like an Essene, but we don't. It's not certain. He seems to have a general. So one of the what it's been suggested that because John the Baptist was preaching a message of repentance through ritual purification, and several of the things he said echoes some of the main talking points within the what we call the sectarian Qumran literature. Importantly, not all the Dead Sea Scrolls are representative of Essenism. Some of it seems to be more broadly Jewish. And this is one of the very complicated questions at play when it comes to assessing the literature and the scrolls. So, but it seems like John the Baptist aligns most closely with the Essenes. And I think it's important to point out one of the reasons why within the New Testament, Jesus' opponents appear to be the Pharisees most often. I think this is reflective of the fact that for whatever reasons, the Pharisees are the only ones to have survived out of all these Jewish sects. The Pharisees are the only ones to have survived the destruction of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple. Don't know why.
Do you think that was? Well, do you speculate that was maybe because they were the largest sect?
Could be. I think it probably has more to do with the fact that they were more widespread across, the Roman Empire, because there were Jews living, all over the place, not just Jerusalem and Judea. So that I'm sure that had something to do with it. But honestly, we just don't know. We don't know. We don't necessarily know why the Essenes didn't survive. Yes, it appears that the Romans came in and sacked Qumran on their way to Masada. But there were other, that wasn't the only place where there were Essenes, right? So I don't know what happened to the rest of them. But for whatever reason, the Pharisees are the only ones to have survived the destruction of the Jerusalem temple. So for good reason, these are the ones that the Gospels are addressing, or I should say they're the right straw man opponent for Jesus as depicted by the Gospel writers. But I also think there's probably some historical currency here within Jesus' own social circle as an itinerant Jewish charismatic. I hesitate to even use the word rabbi, just because I'm not entirely sure that's appropriately. I think it might be a little anachronistic, but
don't the Gospels call him rabbi?
They call him rabbi, but again, remember these are written during the rabbinic, after the emergence of or in the nascent emergence of rabbinic Judaism, right? So all that to say, the reason why Jesus' opponents are always or most frequently the Pharisees, I think, has a ring of historical truth to it, because these are the same people that he would have been encountering within his, his ongoing ministry. Because the Pharisees were widely popular in all, they seem to have had a substantial impact on every social, what do you call that? Every class of Jewish society. They affected, there were high priests from time to time who were Pharisees. Not always, but it happened, right? So, yeah. There we go. Early Judaism.
We have a few super chats. Most of them are toxic, so let's get to
do
them.
Those. Okay. Let's do all the toxicity. Let's get it out of our
Okay. So I just want to. This is it's in the top 3 of the most toxic streams we've ever done. The second most toxic was the debate between Elliot and Godless Engineer. And the third most toxic.
More toxic than that?
No. It's in the top 3. And the other one that was just as toxic was when Godless Engineer and Casey, his partner, came in to bully him when Elliot was on his own channel. So every time there's been drama, it's been the mythicists, especially Godless Engineer, especially Casey, coming in to call the person stupid or uninformed or doesn't know what they're talking about. So I don't know if I'll continue on this mythicist stuff, man, although people seem to like the drama.
I haven't been paying attention to the chat, but have I been called stupid and uninformed
No, people have alluded to that. They called Elliot stupid, but the people have been alluding to that you don't understand.
Oh, I don't understand. Okay.
Well, I'd have to, there's a lot of people who say that you don't read the footnotes or what. Look, honestly,
let's just we read them on the screen.
If you want to insult,
if you closely at all the sources that were within, I don't know.
If you want to us to engage with the insults, super chat, am I right? Vashanti, and then everyone clapped. Thank you for the $2 super chat. Richard Carrier, hello David and Kipp, love the show, sending some support, calm talk over drinks, yay, I'm on some Belvini at the moment. Thank you for the support, Richard.
Richard, you're not drinking Kentucky Mules.
D, thank you for the $5 super chat. What does Dr. Kipp think of Eli Birnbaum? Birnbaum? Currently reading his history of Jewish people. That's a good question.
Yeah, I haven't read his history of the Jewish people, but Birnbaum does a lot of good work. So I mean, yeah, I think he's good.
Awesome. And I've reached out. I've reached out to you know who, so I'm hoping to hear back soon. Thank you for the $5 super chat, D. Richard again.
Oh God!
Thank you so much for the $5 super chat. Kipp, may I include you in my list of scholars who agree, peer-reviewed, not crank, mythicism is at least plausible and should be taken seriously? I think the plausible and seriously part are two separate things.
So I hope you can appreciate my hesitancy to say yes. Because I have I have noticed how these things kind of go. I've seen this list of scholars who at least admit mythicism should be taken seriously, used as a bludgeon to promote the idea that that the case as it's presented within OHJ on the historicity of Jesus is one that has traction within scholarship. So, like, I'm gonna say this. So, and I mean, I really hope. I know this is gonna get taken way out of context because this is the kind of it's YouTube, guys. This is what happens. So let me say this. Of course, it's plausible that that there was no historical Jesus. People are going to clip that. And that's all they're going to see.
Clip. Right? Yeah.
Of course, it's plausible.
It's like how young Earth creationists clip the quote by Darwin, like, I can't understand how the eye work. Yeah.
So, yes, of course. I mean, because I'm somebody who's very, very serious about history, and I'm very interested in history, and I want people to take history seriously. We have to be open to all of these questions. And I've seen this recommended to me, and I'm going to look at it. I haven't. But somebody has suggested that Thomas Brodie's his view of a mythic Jesus is actually fairly compelling and interesting. So I haven't looked at that, and I feel like I probably should. So I will say, of course, mythicism is at least plausible, and yes, it should be taken seriously insofar as we're continuing to ask this question and we're continuing to check up on our usage of the sources and our evaluation of the literature. Unfortunately, I'm also going to have to say that I don't think Richard Carrier's theory of Christian origins is particularly convincing. And I think it's got substantial problems that are, for lack of a better word, fatal, beyond what I've talked about here. so I will say yes. This is something we need to continue asking questions about. But importantly, people also need to recognize that I tend to think that there was a guy at the start of Christianity, because when I look at the evidence, that's what strikes me as most convincing. I can make good sense of what's there, certainly relative to what I'm most interested in, which is early Judaism, and how the early Jewish texts and the Dead Sea Scrolls fit into this amazingly complex web of religious expression in the first century. Am I starting to slur?
No, I think you're okay. I will say that someone needs to write a blog post on some forum. Kipp Davis, now a mythicist? Question mark as the title of the.
Yeah, man, it's coming. With everything that I've seen this week, the past 2 weeks, I have no doubt this is coming.
Awesome. Yeah, the best way to make someone
thank you.
Thanks for bully them into the
Richard.
Yeah, that's good. And Vespa, thank you. Not $1.99 super chat. Is minimal historicity to mythicism a giant leap? I like to answer this as well, because I think what they're saying is like that is the story of Jesus being someone, and then most of the stuff that he did is recorded is kind of theological, is not real, and like the idea that we have of Jesus in our heads is so different to the actual historical Jesus. Is there much of a leap between that? And I think there is a huge leap between that and the minimal mythicist position. Hugely.
I have to think that through a little bit, because on the one hand, it feels like yes, but on the other hand, it also seems like maybe not. But like importantly, I think one of the things that undergirds early Christianity, and is maybe not something that I think one of the things that undergirds Christianity, that contributes to its what's the word I'm looking for? Its momentum, I guess, over time, is the development of martyrdom, which I think is rooted in tragedy. And I'm getting super drunk philosophical. People should.
It's always good to leave the super chats.
People should just go eat dinner now. But one of the, and I guess this is one of the questions that I have when it comes to positing, even the idea of this cosmic, this cosmic Christ figure, as it's portrayed in Richard's theory. One of the things that I have questions about is why on earth this would have been objectionable to anyone within early Judaism. The way I see it, I think the first Christians were a Jewish sect of some sort, and most likely had much more in common with other sects of early Judaism than they did with Paul's version of Christianity. But I think as Paul's version of Christianity began to spread, this idea of martyrdom kind of came with it. And I think that is he tells us this is inextricably connected to the idea that Jesus was crucified. But I'm not an expert. Don't listen to me. Go listen to people who actually know what they're talking about.
Like Deep Drink. Subscribe, everyone. I know everything.
David's got the answers, guys. It said so. I showed you. It said so in 11Q Melchizedek.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You got this engineer. Kipp, do you deny that Carey is grounding his background knowledge in existing scholarship? So this is for another clip, I'm assuming.
It's got shorts in the So I guess
is this kind of like
this is
a gotcha question?
Feels like a gotcha, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't like whatever. So I mean, kind of, but by the same token, I also feel like where Richard has cited secondary literature, there are many times that I don't feel like, and I'm sorry about this, but my sense is that the citations don't accurately represent what's actually going on in these sources themselves. So I guess you could say, so hold on, David. Like, I guess you can say there's all sorts of crap that's grounded in existing scholarship. Oh, geez, I just did that. And now somebody's going to go, oh my God, Kipp did the existing scholarship with regards to like Boyarin and Chilton and all these guys. Shoot. This is so hard.
It's harder because with deep drinks, like, it gets hard, yeah.
Right? Like, sometimes I feel, so I'll say this. Sometimes I feel like Richard doesn't have a strong grasp of what's going on in the conversations as they're taking place within the guild. And it's understandable given that he doesn't have training in the scholarship of the guild. So of course you wouldn't totally get exactly what's going on there all the time. Like, it's, nobody can do that, right? Nobody can be an expert in everything as much as they, might think they can be. So, I mean, honestly, John, this is a difficult question to answer because you can spin this like a million different ways. So I'll say, I guess I'll just say kind of.
Kind of?
Like,
yeah.
Kind of, right? Like, it's there, and he's citing his sources. There are lots of times I don't think he's citing them correctly. And I feel like they're not always being accurately represented. So, yeah.
Look, I don't know if this is the same, but I have a marketing degree, and in my marketing degree, we had to do a lot of assignments. And what I would do if I was stuck with sources is I would use sources that I used in previous assignments that talked about like brand identity or advanced consumer behavior or something, and I would incorporate that into what I'm saying. And I'm speaking about a specific, but what I'm referencing is much more broad. And is that similar to what you think is happening here? That you're getting these like, you're getting...
Oh, goddamn, David. Sorry, I stopped listening to you halfway through.
Okay. So when I was doing my marketing degree, I would read, I would cite a source, and I would talk about a specific, but I would cite a source that was much broader in context. So I would, like, let's say I was talking about like, brand identity or brand equity or something, and then I would cite a paper that talks about branding as a whole, and I would use it to cite, like I would cite that paper and then I would use it to kind of form my argument. But if someone really was like being critical, they could say, well, this isn't saying this isn't saying exactly what you're saying. You're kind of interpreting it to say, like, you're making a point, and then you're going and finding something that mostly agrees or looks like it agrees. But when you look at it more clearly, more precisely, it doesn't say what you think it's saying. Do you think that's what's happening a little bit?
Sometimes, yes. I think sometimes, yes. So can you pull this one up? Because Richard's upset that he says this is false, and it's annoying that I have to quote Boyarin to prove he said what he did. Look, yeah, you're right. I mean, Boyarin did say what he did, but I have to point out that Boyarin, the rabbinic scholar, who is beholden in many respects to what scholars of early Judaism, which is a different thing, are saying, he's got a lot. I mentioned this before, and I'll say it again. Like, when it comes to many of these citations, and this is what I'm talking about when I'm saying that I don't necessarily think that Richard is the right person to be making this case, because he doesn't, through no fault of his own, does not have adequate grounding in the field, because he did something different for his PhD, right? But because
what was his PhD in? Sorry, just to...
it was a history PhD, and he worked on. What
was his
I'm probably gonna get this wrong, but
did he publish his what's it called? What was his dissertation on? Can you read
about
it?
The scientist in Greco-Roman, the scientist in
but it's not relevant to like this.
So it's not about Jewish literature, and it's not about the New Testament, and so, like, I'll say Boyarin is beholden to what scholars of the Dead Sea Scrolls and what scholars of early Jewish literature are saying, and I think in many respects he's wrong about. For example, I think Boyarin, I'll say this outright, I think Boyarin is wrong about how early we can date some of these Talmudic traditions. And the reason he's wrong about that is because he's reading scholarship on, what Dead Sea Scrolls scholars are saying about some of these very, very earlier texts. These are our best texts when it comes to examining the shape of early Judaism. And he's fallen into a specific idea of what's going on there without having a at least this is how I'm reading Boyer, and I don't think he has a full appreciation also of the the broader discussion. And maybe he should. And I also think, even though he says, yes, this is a tradition, he's specifically talking about Sanhedrin 98b. He says this is a tradition that you can date very early. I just don't see the evidence for it. I just don't. And he doesn't ever provide any. He just says it is.
Interesting. There's Sorry, we're gonna finish up. We're gonna finish what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm good. And
okay.
Okay.
It's okay. Captain Dadpool said this. That's the problem with Carrie's argument. They're so fluid that no matter what critique you offer, you can always say that's not my argument. I would say that it appears that way. Carrier, like I said, if there was a way that you could instill what you're actually saying in a way that can't be so ambiguous, I guess that would be super helpful, because literally, and that was the go-to when GE was debating Elliot, he was saying, you don't even understand the theory, you don't even understand the theory, you don't understand. And then GE asked Elliot to still man the position, and you can go watch the video. I then ask GE to steelman the historicity of Jesus, and you can see that he did just as poorly, I would say, as Eliot in steelmanning the position. The debate's still there, but I think it swings both ways, and I think that if you could nail down exactly what you're saying in firm terminology, and an A4 size of paper, I'm making this argument based on this, I'm making this like a syllogism, that I don't know if that's how it works, but like that would be incredibly helpful to this discourse, I would say.
So, and I'll say something on top of that. I think one of my biggest problems is that it feels like, and maybe I am missing something, but this is certainly the impression I get from reading the book, is like the entire argument is based on this idea that there are lots of Jewish sects in the Second Temple period. We know almost nothing about most of them, so it's possible. Some of them could have read Wisdom of Solomon this way, and some of them could have harbored these sorts of ideas that are reflected in the much, much, much later Talmud and the Targumim. And it's possible that somebody read, Isaiah along with Daniel as is presented in this reconstruction of 11Q13 doesn't actually work because of the space issues and the issues of reconstruction. And I gotta say, I don't find that compelling.
Yeah, I mean, I have no
I'm sorry.
expertise, but I don't find it compelling either. But I mean, there are people who also have no expertise who find it compelling. So yeah, I mean, like I said, GE said that very thing at the start of the other episode. We got a really good super chat from Heng Fa Shi. Now, last time you commented super chatted Heng Fa Shi, it became a viral clip on this channel because I was so drunk I couldn't work out what you were saying. So thank you for making this one more.
Look, I just easier. Agreed with Richard Carrier.
Okay, I didn't even see that.
I don't know how. I honestly have no idea how I did.
Okay,
I'm so confused.
But yeah. So Heng Fa Shi. Okay. I was blown away to learn that Satan was not the name, but a title of an office in Yahweh's divine council. Is Messiah kind of also like that? Are there any other office holders that we know of? So this is not super on topic, but it's very, very interesting question.
So, yeah. Messiah, Mashiach, is the proper Hebrew term, and all it means is anointed one. And it's really, really tricky because it follows an evolution that's not always consistent. So it honestly depends on when you're talking about these things. I would say that, like, it's used so in terms of just an historical sketch here, this is a term that is used with reference exclusively to kings and priests within the quote unquote biblical period. And when I say that, I'm talking about the like the pre-exilic Israelite period, and all it means is anointed, and it's with reference to this literal idea that kings and priests were anointed, like they had oil poured over them as part of their commissioning ceremony or what have you. So that's where it starts. Over time, after the Babylonian exile, sometime during the Persian or the Hellenistic period, this term itself starts to develop a new meaning with regards to someone's status relative to the representation of Yahweh. As I mentioned, Alex Jason, and I would recommend it. I mean, it's tough because it's a scholarly book, but Alex Jason has done a lot of really good work on exploring the usage of this term in the Second Temple period, and I think he's right in falling on this idea that during the Hellenistic period into the Hasmonean period. So what we're talking about is like 3rd century BC through to 1st century BCE. It really seems like this term starts to become used with reference to prophets as a way of describing their connection to Yahweh as specially commissioned to deliver special messages from Yahweh to the people. It's all very fuzzy, but at some point, between there and the destruction of the temple, this idea of like an anointed one as somebody who is a king, and actually there's this notion that there's prior to the destruction of the temple, well, even after within rabbinic Judaism, there's this idea that there's going to be multiple Mashiachim, or anointed ones. There's an anointed king, and there's an anointed priest, and there's an eschatological prophet, somebody who's going to proclaim the end of the age, who could be considered, even though he's not always identified as such, I think relative to Jason's definition, could be considered an anointed figure. It certainly becomes a title, but it's way too simple to just say that's what it is. This is all very developmental, and it's all very complicated. And like I said, it really depends on the time period that you have in mind here. And even then, because lots of these ideas are fluid and developing, you're going to get conflicting ideas about what a term means, even within an isolated time period from one sect of Judaism to another. That's probably very unsatisfying as an answer, Heng Fashi. By the way, Heng Fashi is one of my patrons. So
same.
Thanks so much for supporting the channel.
They've just become a patron of mine as well. They're really
awesome,
engaging on Patreon and giving a lot of pointers and advice. And they're an artist, so they've been talking to me about that, which is really cool.
Heng Fashi must be very, very smart and is making extremely good, well thought
yes.
out.
Yes. Everyone should follow Heng Fashi. Got $2.99 for the chat.
Start a patron.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. What do you think of the ossuaries, Dr.
Of
Kipp?
the ossuaries.
Ossuaries.
Okay. I suspect this has to do with the is it the Talpiot tomb? For people who don't know, an ossuary is a box that measures, I don't know, about like 70, 80 centimeters by 30 centimeters by, what is that? That's like 40, 50 centimeters.
What's that in cubits? I only use cubits.
If you're an American and if you don't know what I'm talking about, then like I don't know what to tell you. But so these are
can we please just use cubits? Cubits is the what we use on deep pics.
Okay. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. An ossuary is a box that's made of plaster. They were all the rage for probably a 200 or 300 year period between like the Hellenistic period up until the destruction of the temple, I'm not sure if they continued to be used with much consistency beyond then. But what happened was wealthy Jewish elites would bury their dead in a tomb, and they would leave them there for like a year or 2 years. Yes, Rachel, I am drunk. They'd leave them there for a couple of years, and after all the flesh and everything decayed, they would then go back and take the bones and deposit them in these smaller boxes, and then they'd store the boxes in the tombs. So like a Jewish family tomb would simultaneously have bodies within it as next to these boxes, and the idea was based on the practice was based on this idea that in the last days, your remains, your body, would be resurrected, and you would be given a new life as like a person on Earth. So they held onto the bones so that there was something there to resurrect. Now, I suspect this has to do. There have been a couple of sensational finds. So first of all, I need to say there's ossuaries all over the place within Israel. Like I have stayed in the King David Hotel, and I'm not kidding you. There's planters with like plants in them, like littered throughout the hotel lobby and in the conference areas, that are ossuaries. Like I'm not kidding. They pulled these out of. They're plentiful. They're all over the place. So, and yeah, go check out the go check out the plants at the Jerusalem hotel, at the King David Hotel in Jerusalem. It's crazy.
Wow.
Where was I going with this? So, most famously, there's a couple of ossuaries. There was one that was promoted. This was, I think, around the year 2002, 2003. An antiquities dealer by the name of Oded Golan sold this ossuary to the Royal Ontario Museum in my home and native land of Canada, and they featured it within their museum for like a year. There was a Society of Biblical Literature conference that was actually constructed around this exhibit at the Royal Ontario Museum, because the ossuary itself had an inscription on it. These boxes were oftentimes, engraved with the names of the, what do you call it? The person who's in the box.
Dava.
The occupier. The occupier of the ossuary oftentimes had his name engraved. One of these ossuaries was engraved with Yaakov bar Yeshua bar Yaakov Ahi Yeshua bar Yosef, which translated means James, brother of Jesus, son of Joseph.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah. Right. So, and it was being promoted as the bone box of the ossuary belonging to James, the actual brother of Jesus. It's a forgery.
How are you going to say that?
I know. Sorry, man. So, the inscription probably originally read something about Yeshua bar Yosef, Joshua, son of Yosef, both of which are very common names from first century Palestine. And somebody then later on engraved this Yaakov Achi, James, the brother of, right? Before it. There's a great book actually all about this. Sorry, it's behind my chair. Nina Burleigh, she's a journalist. She wrote an excellent book called Holy Relics, I think, which is all about the James ossuary and the forgery and the trial and all this stuff. So Oded Golam will tell you that he was acquitted. So it must be real. Importantly, he was acquitted on 2 counts of like 37. So I'm probably going to get those numbers wrong. But anyways, it's this bone box is a forgery. James Tabor and Sasha Jacobovici, who I know some think that I'm a really big fan of Sasha Jacobovici because when I was a PhD student, I appeared in the background of a show that Sasha Jacobovici did back in 2005 or 2006 when I was working in Israel. So no, I have no connection to Sasha Jacobovici, but Sasha Jacobovici, James Tabor, and James Cameron have popularized this idea that there was a tomb that contained ossuaries. I'm not sure what the plural of that is. I'll accept that it's ossuaries. And these were all identified as belonging to members of Jesus' family. Joseph and Mary and Jude, I guess. I don't know. There's major problems with this identification. The vast majority of scholars do not accept this identification. I won't take the time to go into the reasons why, but I will simply say that we have no remains of anyone from Jesus's actual family, as far as we know. And most likely because Jesus and all the members of his family were actually almost certainly not buried in tombs. Sorry, that was a super long answer, but
they sent it to heaven. That's what happened. Guys, before we got one last super chat, or 2 last super chats, we'll get through them quickly. But before we do that, subscribe to Deep Drinks. We have some awesome guests coming up, including Dr. Kipp again to talk about creation myths with Pelagia and Dr. Josh. Someone said, "You beautiful bastard, you've done it again," and I was like, "I agree. It's great to have you guys on the panel." Dr. Robin Walsh, which is going to be awesome about her book.
So, hold on. Sorry. No. Yeah? Oh, okay. Promote Robin Walsh.
And of course, Dr. Not Dr. Matthew. Wow. Matt Dillahunty, which will be awesome. Guys, we also have an Instagram. If you're not following, which is something like what? All right, 72 people follow it. You need to get onto Instagram and follow this account. It is a goldmine of hilarious and amazing content from Deep Drinks. I am hilarious and insightful and amazing. You need to subscribe. We also have a Deep Drinks Facebook page where people can post whatever they want in regards to religion, philosophy, and human rights. We might put a ban on mythicism because I'm so sick of the toxicity there, but hey, if you want to post some stuff here, this is a community where we can talk about all things religion, philosophy, and human rights. But yes, make sure you subscribe.
So, first of all, I'm 50 years old and I don't even know what Instagram is. Secondly, I want to say I'm very, very excited, David. I don't even think you knew this. I'm very excited for our stream next week because, I've done a bunch of stuff with Josh before, live. I have never been on a live stream with Paulogia before.
Yeah. Or maybe I was on
one. I'm super excited about being on a live stream with both of them together.
Look at it. Like, so I literally, we ended the stream and I said with Paulogia, and I said, you know, like, people love the stream. And I was like, Paulogia, I was like, look, man, if ever you want on this channel again, like, let me know. And he goes, in his deep, raspy voice, well, you know, I can't do it. I can't do it. Kent Hovind thinks it's he deepens his voice artificially, which is so funny. And he goes, well, I always like doing stuff with, I always like to be on a stream with Kipp and Josh. And I was just like, I can make that happen. Yeah. So he said that. So I said, yeah. I said, I'll make it happen. So I emailed him and I said, well, I messaged you, I messaged Josh, that you both said yes. And then I messaged him and said, look, I told you, I made it happen within like a day. Yeah.
You're my new best friend.
It's gonna be great. It's gonna be fun.
Bring it up again, because I made a comment about this, but it probably, like, you know how the chat, they disappear. But like, look at that. Don't we look like a rock band? Maybe not you, but
no, yeah.
Come on, guys. We're a rock band. Creation, man.
I like about
it's a new band.
I like that with these panels. These are all the panels we do here. I put, like, because I'm a panelist, sometimes I'm a host, but it gives me a lot of credibility. Like, look at this. I didn't put myself in the slavery one, but look at this. Like, I just like, I'm up here. Hey guys, look, I made it, mom. I made it, mom. So anyway, okay, let's get some super chats.
Rock out.
we should. Last two super chats, and then we've got to end up the stream. I've got to do a full day of work after this. So the Enoch seminar recently held a peer review session on a book called Messianic High Christology. Seen it? Thank you, Q-Source.
Sounds awesome. Thank you, Q-Source. I have not seen it, and it feels like something that I should probably check out. I am very interested in almost everything the Enoch seminar does. So another thing I will mention is that weirdly, I have never presented at the Enoch seminar. For people who don't know, I think I mentioned this earlier. The Enoch seminar is a group of scholars who are really interested in Second Temple Judaism, and in particular, in what's called Enochic Judaism. It's organized, or at least it used to be organized, by Gabriele Boccaccini, who is a phenomenal Jewish scholar from Italy. I think he's retired now. I'm pretty sure he's retired now, but he started this. I've never presented a paper at the Enoch seminar, but I will say, so almost all of my friends have presented papers at the Enoch seminar. And as a result, every year at SBL, I crash the Enoch seminar reception. I'm not sure if I should, but I'm there like every year, mostly because my buddies are always there. But you know, maybe someday I'll get to the Enoch seminar.
Cool.
Thanks. I will try and check that out.
Abe, another $2.99 super chat. Looks like you're in Australia. It's cool to see you in Australia. Yeah. What do you think of Secret Mark? Also forgery.
So, yeah, this is probably not a fair question for me, because my predisposition is that everything's a forgery. So
yeah, well, you're the forgery guy, right?
Yeah, right. So and I've been accused of this. This is something that I regularly have been chided for. I'm not. I'm too skeptical. So I tend to think, I haven't spent a lot of time with Secret Mark, but based on the bits and pieces that I know about Secret Mark, for people who are unaware, I'm probably going to get this wrong, but I think it was Morton Smith was the discoverer of Secret Mark, which was supposedly a, maybe it was a palimpsest or a manuscript that he transcribed and then translated, and then was suddenly lost, as these things happen. Yes, thank you, Richard. It was Martin Smith. So my tendency is to think that probably a forgery, but again, I don't think it's fair, because this is my starting point. I mean, like I said, I think everything's a forgery, and I try very hard to be sufficiently convinced about manuscripts before I accept them as authentic. So
I have a question. And this is the last question.
Okay.
Is On the Historicity of Jesus a forgery, or did Richard Carrier really write it? Is the Richard Carrier that's in the YouTube chat, is that the real Richard Carrier, or is that a forgery? Is that someone pretending? I'm just kidding. I hope that, look, I know there was
like
I hope everyone's cool.
I have to say something though. I'm pretty sure it was Tim McGrew. You guys know Tim McGrew, right? He's like this terrible, terrible Christian apologist.
No, I don't.
He wrote like a super long article about whether or not Richard Carrier actually existed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he did.
That's funny.
He really did. That's right, Richard, isn't it? Yes, they're McGrews. So yeah, I gotta say, I will remain agnostic on that point.
I believe you. I believe Richard wrote. No, it's not a forgery. No. So, guys, it did get spicy in the chat. I hope, like, honestly, I hate the drama, although it's brought in a lot of viewers. So I hope you enjoy that. I find it interesting. I'm not personally convinced of mythicism myself. I don't know why everyone gets so up in arms about it. I can understand why it's very frustrating that people don't seem to understand the theory. I also understand it's frustrating that people don't take it seriously where you feel like they should. But
I think it's fair. Yeah.
But here we have deep conversations over deep drinks, and very soon, I'm going away actually for a few days. And I'm going to be working on some cool ideas, and then we'll be coming back in 6 days for the Creation Myths episode. So everyone stick around for that. And of course, your course, which everyone should go subscribe to, linked in the description, as well as your YouTube channel. If you want to hear more about this stuff, YouTube channel as well. But thank you everyone for coming out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Oh, well, what were you going to say? What were you going to say?
Sorry.
No, what were you going to say?
I'm just way too drunk for this, but no, I think the course is pretty good.
Okay, cool. All right, see you guys.
Please check out the course. It's good.
Awesome. All right, bye.